Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. You are here for a reason, and I'm grateful for you. And I hope this episode is good for your soul, that you do some rumbling and some expanding, and maybe you decide you're going to make one little change today about your relationship with screen time. I consistently struggle with this. And I know I'm not alone because the screens and our phones have everything on it. Ways to communicate with our families, our businesses, social media. There's so much on our phone and information that it's so incredibly hard to disconnect from. And we know now through so much research, it's addicting. It absolutely is addicting. And we talk all about that. We talk about the pull it has on us, what it's doing to us, noticing what it's doing to our brains and our bodies. How do we make small changes to change our relationship with screens, social media, your phones, TV, binge watching shows? We talk all about it. And those are the conversations I really like because we're just sharing the truth about how we all struggle with this. And she gives several book recommendations, the ones that she likes, which I'm starting to ask in every episode, because if you know me, I love a good book. I like recommending books because I like expanding my heart, my brain, my way of thinking about things so I can grow and learn. And so I'm starting to ask many of my guests their favorite books, which I'm going to link in the show notes. And then if you also want to join the newsletter, we're including these in the newsletter. And you can join the newsletter at Kristen, Kristen, Boyce, BOICE.com/free resources. And we'll link them in the newsletter, and we'll also link them in the show notes. So if you want to grab the book, you'll be able to. So I hope this episode is helpful to you. Tag me on social, share it with your friends. So funny I'm saying that when we're talking about getting off screens. So take that with a grain of salt, if you will. Let me introduce you to my guest. Palak Dave is a mission-driven entrepreneur, experience expert, speaker, and author of Beautiful Everydays, a guide to living in the here and now. Formerly an award-winning marketer with senior-level positions at companies including the Toronto International Film Festival and Indigo Books and Music, Palak began her entrepreneurial journey in 2017 by founding the Embria Social Club, a community focused on helping women feel more fulfilled in their everyday lives. She's curated and hosted over 350 community and media events, and Palak thrives on bringing people together, especially over a meal. There's so much more to say about her. She's traveled to over 40 countries. She has lived a well-experienced life, and she's on a journey, too, of healing. She talks about losing her father at an early age. And so without further ado, here is my connective conversation. Enjoy. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. I am so grateful you are joining me today. How many of you have felt like we need a digital detox? The internet, social media zaps us in so many ways, but yet we're afraid to limit it or get off of it because we do have some sense of knowing what's going on with other people. And yet we don't feel great when we're on it all the time. And my guest today spends a lot of time helping people build connections, not only with themselves, but with other people, how to get off the social media and get back into connection with each other. I'm so grateful you're here, Palak. Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's talk about your inspo for Beautiful Everydays, because your cover is gorgeous. Love it. It's very soothing to the nervous system. What made you want to write this book?
So this is a great question because it goes much deeper than what I initially thought. At first, I would have told you maybe 2 years ago, I would have said to you, well, I wrote it because a lot of women in my community have been asking me on ways to feel more connected to themselves on a day-to-day basis. So they would normally come to my gatherings or my events that I would host through my business, and they would leave feeling really good. And they thought, how can I get this all the time? I don't want to just feel this once a month or once every few weeks. I want to feel good in my day-to-day. And so for me, it really was about building a tool that they could have, that they could turn to at any time and flip to and have as a resource and a guide. But then I dug a little bit deeper and I realized that my deep why around why I want women to feel more fulfilled in their day-to-day has to do with the fact that I want women to make the most of their lives and I don't want it to pass them by. And the reason I feel so strongly about this is because when I was only 15 years old, my dad passed away of a sudden heart attack. And he always had all these plans to do things in the future. So he would talk a lot about traveling the world with his wife, my mom, so making plans for us as a family. But when he retired, so there was a lot of planning of, we got to work hard now, and eventually I'd love to do X, Y, and Z with you guys as a family. But he passed away before he retired and never had the chance to do any of those things. And so I really didn't understand that until maybe the past 5 years when I did a lot of my own reflection and healing and really understood that I don't want to waste my life away and I don't want to just spend it all working for the goal of someday enjoying it and finding fulfillment after I'm done doing all the hard work. I want to be able to weave that into my everyday life. And so the concept of beautiful everydays is about finding that beauty and fulfillment in your day to day, no matter how busy you are, no matter how much you have going on at work, no matter what your schedule looks like. It's important to carve out a life that you love every day and not just one day.
Oh, wow. What a beautiful story. And kind of the legacy of your dad saying, okay, I'm going to honor you in a way, right? To say, I'm going to do all the things that you wanted to do, but help myself and other people be able to not put those things off.
Exactly, because I think it's so easy for us to think of someday. We all do it. I was guilty of doing it myself. I mean, I was a very overachieving kid, and growing up, I would be like straight A's, got a great job out of university, was climbing the corporate ladder, and I just wasn't taking those pauses for myself. And at one point when I hit the age of 30, I was like, is this all there is? Am I just going to work my way through life? And then that's when sort of that healing journey started. And I started to do a lot of reflection, realize that why do I want to continue on that hamster wheel? I don't want that to happen to me. And now I really don't want women to have to face a tragedy or something horrible happens in their lives for them to sort of awaken to the fact that they need to make the most of their day to day. And I find that we forget that our lives are not infinite, and we forget that we don't have just forever to go. Obviously, we all know that our lives are short and we have to make the most of our time, but unless something major happens in our lives, we usually just are sort of on that hamster wheel. And so for me, that was a wake-up call because of what happened to me, and now I want to use that to be able to encourage other women before they have to face something tragic in order to sort of wake up to their life. And so that's why it is so personal to me, and it is a beautiful way to honor him, because I do feel like he would have wanted me to live my life to the fullest. And I'm glad that I can be able to do that at a younger age and experience it in my everyday life now.
Yeah, because our parents' generation, they didn't get that permission slip, right?
Exactly.
It's work hard, provide, do all these things, and then I'll get you all launched, and then we'll do all these, we'll travel and we'll celebrate and we'll do all these fun adventures.
Yep, exactly. It was them putting it off, and it was survival mode. And I get it because, they were raising a family and they had 2 kids that they were trying to build a beautiful life and future for. But I do think that our generation, we're in a more privileged position to be able to make those choices. So if we have that choice, then we have to really become more conscious of it and aware to the fact that we should use that to our advantage. Like, we're able to have that freedom and flexibility. So why are we not infusing more of it into our day-to-day lives? Like, we're just stuck in this mentality of just doing and executing and being busy and achieving. And those are all great things. But there has to be sort of a balance on the other side of, well, how are we actually spending our time? Are we filling it with the things we love and the experiences we love and the people that we love to be around? And sort of being conscious of those decisions that's what's going to make up your life. And when you look back at the end of it, you will remember those things, not necessarily all the things you did at work and the meetings that you had and the times that you worked endless hours and didn't make time for rest.
Yeah. And I think people that go through the life or death process will say, I mean, on their deathbed, that they regret not doing those things and not really relationally is one of the biggest regrets. Like, I wish I didn't work as much. I wish I wouldn't have pushed my kids as much. There's all these regrets of wish they would have lived in the moment more.
Yeah. And we have that information. So why not use it? Like, that's a blessing for us to know, to collect that information and say, there are people that are telling us this. And we know that that's sort of what statistics show, that the most regrets are around those relational things, or saying, oh, I wished I reached out to that friend more. I wish I actually ended up resolving a conflict that I had with somebody. So those are the things that I think make the most difference and sort of have significance in terms of our life events.
I wonder, and tell me what your thoughts are, of how much fear plays a role. Like, if I don't continue to work hard, if I don't continue to achieve, if I don't have enough money to save, insert fear, really holds us back from living the moment.
Fear is probably one of the biggest roadblocks that we face within ourselves. And I'm sure you can speak to this even much more than I can, but it is so interesting because it's through a lot of the work that I've done that I've realized that even my own limitations within myself, it has nothing to do with the lack of tools or resources or knowledge or even just like expertise, but it's more around the limiting beliefs or the fear that I have around things that I've had to learn to work through. And absolutely, if we're able to kind of remove the fear and work on the fear, then there is just limitless potential that's there. But I think what's really interesting too is we often think we have to do these things. We have to work really hard to achieve. But what I found is if we scale back a little bit and we create some breathing room for things that light us up and bring us joy and the experiences that we love, we actually will be better off in our work and in our relationships and our day-to-day life because we're filling our own cups. It's kind of like that whole analogy around put on your own oxygen mask first on a plane before you give to others. We have to fill our own cups. And by doing so, we'll be more aligned in our lives and we'll feel more fulfilled. So therefore, our work will actually improve and become easier. So ironically, there is a bit of a thing where you spend less time on work, but you really focus in on the things that light you up. And therefore, your work will actually become more easeful and you'll have a bit more flexibility in your schedule. But we think we need to push and we need to do it because it is coming from a place of fear. So we think more is better or working harder is better, but that's not always the case.
I agree. And I think it can free space up for you to actually get clear on what those things are that you want more of in your life. Because sometimes when we're in the grind, we're like sleepwalking through our lives where we're kind of in a restricted space rather than an open, expansive space to say, what do I want? What would this look like? Let's take social media, for example. That can create restriction. So I might be fear of FOMO, fear of missing out if I don't see what someone posted or with the latest and greatest or whatever. It's like an addiction, right?
Yeah.
How does someone begin to even start saying, okay, because I know your book has exercises, like what would be some of the things you would recommend for us to get off of our phones?
There's so many things because we happen to be in this sort of group we're very much in it. There's not really like guidelines and rules and regulations. We're all sort of finding our way in our own relationship with our phones, and no one's telling us, oh, you should really cut it down or you should really spend only this amount of time. We're all individually navigating our relationships with our devices. And it can vary because some of us need it for our businesses. Some of us just love it for inspiration. Some of us use it to keep in touch with people. So it has so many different uses, and that's why it's so complex because there is no one-size-fits-all formula. But what we do know is that it's not making us feel better. So we absolutely know that based on any scientific research that's been done around studies. And there's a really good book called The Anxious Generation, which shares a lot of statistics around what is happening with our behaviors and our phones and what's happening to the next generation in terms of teens and how it's causing so much anxiety and how it's having an effect on our day-to-day lives. And so it's a very complicated topic, but one of the things that I love to talk about in terms of a more natural way to be able to approach this is it's really hard to say, oh, just get rid of your phone. Obviously, so many things happen on our phones, right? And it's very hard to just completely disconnect because we have lots of things that we do on our phone and they are a part of our day-to-day lives. So we can't just completely remove it and go into the forest and do a digital detox for a month. So I like to say, rather than think about what you need to get rid of, sometimes it's what can you do more of that will inherently make you put your phone down. And that's about finding the things that light you up outside of activities on your phone. So one of the biggest ways that I see people automatically putting their phones down is when they're gathering in person with people that they enjoy spending time with and doing activities that they love. So if you're filling more of your schedule with things that actually fulfill you and light you up, you are naturally going to be spending less time on your phone. So that could look like a dinner with friends that you're just gathering once a month and you spend a really good night with your girlfriends and you're not even like thinking about your phones because you're engaged in really deep conversations and having a great time. It could look like a once a week activity that you commit to that you're so immersed that you're not thinking about your phone and you're not picking it up. So for a lot of people right now, that's pickleball. And I think that there is a pickleball craze because we're immersing ourselves in something where we're not having to think, but we're able to be social and it keeps us active, it keeps our body moving, and it lights us up. And so that's why it's been so popular recently, or pottery workshops have become really popular recently because you're using your hands and you're no longer thinking. And what's interesting about this is that a lot of women feel that they're tired by the end of the day. So you think you want to do sort of mind-numbing things that you don't have to think. And that often involves scrolling on your phone or binge watching a show because you're like, oh, I can turn my brain off. I can just be entertained and I don't have to think. But actually doing those things can leave us feeling more depleted and more exhausted and more anxious than if we were to fill it with activities that actually light us up, which would leave us feeling more energized and motivated and inspired. So I like to say to think about your schedule and think about things that you can fill your time with that actually bring you joy versus things that will leave you feeling depleted.
I love those ideas. And that makes sense for where they pickleball is a craze. And taking classes are so helpful to people because you're redirecting, like you said, your brain.
Yeah.
And you'll notice when you do things at times when you have pockets of a pause, you'll go, oh, I need to check my phone. You'll notice that little blip. I forgot. I wonder if I'm waiting for a text. Or you can see how your mind wants to redirect you back to your phone.
Because
and I think
it's an addiction.
It is. And it's powerful. We went to the beach and I was reading and I was so enjoying it. I was like, I miss this. I set my phone down, but I noticed my thoughts of, oh, I want to pause right now and take a break from my book and I'm going to go numb on my phone. It's just this interesting pull, which is the addictive cycle.
Yes, absolutely. And it's scary because the statistics show that people that are reading, the number of hours we're spending reading has actually gone down significantly. And because our attention spans are shorter. So we read maybe a few pages and then we're a little bored or it's not as exciting and we want to put the book down and pick up our phone instead. So it is looking at it from like the quick hits of dopamine versus something that's going to give you more fulfillment over a prolonged period of time. So there's a false sense of joy that your phone is bringing you and a false sense of connection. It's more surface level. It's more immediate. So you think that like, oh, that's actually making me feel really good. Meanwhile, if you're immersed in a really good book and you're reading it over a few weeks, you're coming back to it and there's a story there or there's something that you're allowing it to build over time. And that will end up bringing more fulfillment and joy and even learning or inspiration more than a quick 2 minutes on your phone scrolling endless videos will bring you.
Yeah. And you can notice your brain's difference. Like I can see what the phone has done to my attention span. It's fascinating to be an observer of your own brain. I was like, oh, wow, I can see my attention span has decreased.
Yep.
Because of this dopamine hit, because these 30-second, 2-minute videos, what that has done to my attention span. And how you feel. So it's really important to be an observer of that, I think, to start recognizing it and begin a willingness to change it.
Yes, exactly. And it's honestly as wild as saying, put your phone out of the room. So if you're doing something else and you are reading a good book, the way to sort of go against that natural inkling of wanting to pick it up all the time is if it's not within reach, you're less likely to actually then leave the room, put your book down, and go grab the phone. I know we have a lot of limits that we try and individually set on our phone. A lot of us ignore those limits. And so that's natural. It happens. Don't judge yourself. Like, give yourself grace, knowing that it is an addictive device. And so it's not fully you. It's the fact that it's designed to be that way. But being able to create those boundaries, and they're physical boundaries of saying, okay, I'm going to leave my phone outside the room while I read, or I'm going to cook a meal and I'm not going to be checking my notifications, or every 5 seconds when I get a text message or something's buzzing, then you're all of a sudden taking away from even the joy of cooking suddenly, and you're looking at your phone instead. So all of these things that we could be immersed in our present day lives in the here and now and in the moments in the here and now, and our phone is like constantly tugging at us to pull us away from the moment and to look at what's happening behind a screen, which 90% of the time is probably stuff you don't even need to know or see.
It's so important. I think the other piece I saw this research recently is in like the 1960s, 60% of people's time was spent with family and friends. It was like 67%. Okay.
Wow.
It's like 5 to 6% now.
Wow.
And guess what's number one?
Our phones.
Technology.
Yeah. Anything behind a screen.
I don't know how accurate those numbers are. It was jarring. I was like, wow. In the 60s, it was 67% of our time was family and friends. And now that's almost at the bottom of the list.
Oh, it's so sad to me, because I see women gather, and I see when I host these events for my membership community, or when I host in-person events to bring women together, and I see the joy that it brings them, and I see how immersed they are and how much they need that in-person connection. And I know that it makes them feel good. And it's one of those things that it's good for you, but you're not necessarily doing enough of it because there's other things to fall back on, like your devices and your screens. So it's like anything where we know it might feel good to take a bath on a Sunday, but we don't always do it. We're like, oh, we should take more baths. We should move our bodies more. We should eat more nourishing foods. The same way we need to do all those things to keep ourselves feeling good, we should also spend less time on our phones. And if you look at, for example, the blue zones where people live the longest, one of the biggest factors in terms of why they're living the longest is because they have a sense of community, and they meet in person, and they see the community very often, and they have those relationships with friends and family that leave them feeling nourished and fulfilled. And so if we're getting rid of that, I can only imagine that it's going to have an effect on our lifespan and our well-being and sort of our mental health and all the things that come with that. It's just that we don't necessarily see that immediately, and so we don't make that association, but over time, all these things add up. And it's like you said, doing that check-in. If you're just notice after even like 20 minutes of scrolling your phone. Do you get off your phone thinking, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. I'm so inspired and excited to dive into something new. Or do you feel kind of achy about your life and yourself and the way you look and the way that your life is and the experiences you're having because you're just looking at other people living and you're not actually spending time living your own life?
Yeah. And if we did data on how much time we've wasted, you know how on your phone it can say you've been on 6 hours this week or whatever, gives you that statistic, and we're like, whatever, we scroll past it.
Yeah. But it's really
think about it. And you want your relationships to be so important. Like, I know we have introverts that need downtime, and I'm not saying that. But if we, at the end of the day, we look at how much time I've wasted on social media, it's so jarring to really think about where could I have invested more time that would have mattered.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we do have hours that we're collecting doing things that just don't light us up. And if you do look at that, I mean, most women will say, I'm so busy, I don't have time in my schedule to add in anything else. I feel overworked, overtired. If you have kids, it's like your schedule is out of control. But then if you actually do look at the time spent on your phone, it usually amounts to hours, as you said, multiple hours, between like 6 to 13 hours a week or something on social media. And I know that a lot of women feel, well, that's my downtime. That's my time to like just unwind and be me. But as I said before, those are not necessarily activities that are making you feel good, which is why they're in a cycle of exhaustion, because you're not feeling rejuvenated when you're on your phone for 13 hours a week. You're feeling more depleted, and therefore the cycle continues. Whereas if you replace a few of those hours with activities that make you feel fulfilled, you're going to notice that you're feeling more energized and you just have more to give and you're feeling more fulfilled. So it is a vicious cycle that we're in. And unfortunately, we're at a time and place where we do need to take control over it rather than it controlling us. So it is a conscious decision that needs to be made, and little micro habits over time that can stack to lead to a more fulfilling life.
What would be some of those micro habits? Like for me, at one point this is, 15 years ago, even longer. I was into reality TV. I mean, it was like the Real Housewives and the Kardashians. And I felt like horrible when I would watch that. I'd be so stressed. I could feel it in my body. And then one day at the time, my daughter was real young. She's like, "What are you watching, Mom?" And I was like, "What am I watching? Like, why am I watching this?" It was a wake up call to say, this isn't what I want to model. Not that picking on anybody that watches reality TV. Please know that. For me, I didn't like how that felt.
Yes.
I didn't like how I felt.
Yeah.
And so I got off of it and then gradually got onto the social media. And so that's important to say, okay, now what? And now I'm working on reading more, walking, some of these other journaling, getting back into my routines that really help me feel better. What are some of those so back to my question, what are some of those micro things people can start doing to live in the here and now?
I love that you brought up that example of the reality TV because it does happen. I love that you noticed that it was happening. And even if it's your daughter saying it, and that's what makes you sort of pause and think, oh, right, I don't actually feel that great watching this. I've had that. I've experienced that before after I've watched a show way too quickly. And suddenly I'll be like, oh, I just spent 10 hours over the past 2 days, like binging 10 episodes of something. And I don't feel so good now. I really wish I didn't do that. And so it is great that you're noticing that. And in terms of the micro habits, like one thing I love is you don't need a 10-step routine to start your morning. So a lot of people think, we hear all the things that we need to add into our days to make us feel more rejuvenated and refreshed. And we need to cold plunge and sauna and move and Pilates and like all the things. We don't need all the things, but one of the things that you can implement that I guarantee will make you feel better is just, it sounds simple, but not reaching for your phone first thing in the morning. I like to say, even if you are going to reach for your phone eventually, you should create before you consume. So if you are on it to post or you're doing any stories or you run a business and you actually have to be on there for your work, create before you consume, because as soon as you open it up and you're consuming first, you're allowing all that other stuff in that's going to sway your opinion on judging yourself, whether you think the thing that you're posting is good enough, whether it matches the quality of someone else's, whether you're living your life the way that you should, and you start to question everything. So creating before consuming is really key, and not doing it first thing in the morning. I personally will try and have about an hour and a half in my morning before I even touch any technology. So for me, that means being intuitive and looking at what I need that morning. There's some non-negotiables. I want some form of movement in my day, but that can mean anything from a HIIT workout to a Pilates to a yoga to a walk. It doesn't have to be all the things. It's just me picking from this sort of toolkit or menu of things that I can choose from that make me feel good. And then I'll do like a walk with my dog. I'll have some lemon water in the morning. I might meditate or journal. I might not do both every day, but I do whatever I can in the time that I have to make me feel good for how I feel that day. And so I try and be really intuitive about it. And then only when I'm starting my sort of work day do I actually pick up my phone. And then I'm checking, okay, let me pop into my email. Let me check my social media accounts. Let me see if there's any messages that come through. And then the second micro habit that I like to talk about is using your time on these social apps in a more intentional way. So having a purpose when you go on them, rather than thinking you have to do all the things at once, because these apps are now designed to do a million different things. You can connect with people, you can scroll for inspiration, you can just be posting, you can do all sorts of different things on there. And so what happens is you might go on for one purpose, but you end up doing 10 different things. And then you're like, oh, how did an hour just go by? Whereas if you know that you're going on because you need to respond to some messages, then just do that. Carve out the time to just do the one thing at a time. And then it could be multiple chunks in your day. Maybe it's 15-minute slots, like every few hours you have 15 minutes dedicated to checking in on things. but just try to do one activity when you're on there. So that way, when you end your sort of 15-minute session, you don't feel as bad because you know you went on just to message people back or just to put up a post or a story. And then you get off and you leave it and you let it breathe for a bit. And that just allows for a feeling of like you're in control of the activity that you're doing on there versus it controlling you.
I think those are great suggestions. And man, it's such a pull for folks. I've been asking myself, not on my business account, because that feels separate than my personal account. So I have two accounts, a personal and a business. And I've been asking on my personal account, like, why do I want to post this? And a lot of times it's because I want the memories. I like it when it pops up on the timeline. 1 year ago today. Okay, but I could do that in other ways. Like you can do that on Time Hop. It's a different app. Like that's more private. You can do it in different ways. Yeah. And I've just really reevaluated, why am I posting? And I think that is, why am I on here? Asking yourself, like, why am I on this app right now? Oh, I want to see this, or I want to see that, or what is it? Why are you on the app? So it's slowing things down mindfully and checking in, because I think what it does is it checks us out rather than checks us. I disconnect from myself when I'm on social media. I'm scrolling. I'm not connected to myself.
Totally. And I love that you're bringing this up because it's such an important reflection. It's similar to what you said about the reality TV. The first step is awareness, right? So you get that at that level, that having awareness around your behaviors and your activity and why it's so sort of unconscious. You're not actually intentionally doing things. So I love that reflection. And funny enough, I heard someone the other day talk about the fact that they no longer use social media and they actually grew their business not using social media. So they said they grew it by like 170%. It was busier than ever. And the interview was all about, well, how did you do that? Like, how could you possibly exist without social media? And it was funny because they said something that you had said earlier about FOMO, about this fear of missing out on the app. So when you're on there, you actually end up scrolling more because you want to feel like you're catching up on everything, right? On everyone's life. And it's like, I got to see what so-and-so's up to. I got to see what's happening. Oh, if I'm off of it for 2 days, I'll feel like I'm disconnected. But what she said was so interesting, that once you break that completely, like she is not on social media at all. If you don't need to be, or you feel that you can build your business in creative ways off of it, that FOMO, you'll see within a few days, will completely dissipate because it's just non-existent to you. So you no longer will be wondering what your acquaintance from high school is doing because it won't matter. And so by seeing it every day, we actually have this false sense of we need to know, and that is a form of connection, but it's not. And you'll realize the people that it does matter about, you're connecting with them in person, or you're texting them, or you're FaceTiming them. So you're using technology in other ways. Like you might go on a trip, and instead of them just seeing a million posts from your trip, they're going to actually ask you, or you're going to be able to text them and say, hey, I just came back from this really great vacation in Italy. Like, here's a few pictures. And you share that private moment with them, and you inherently have less FOMO because you're suddenly not like looking at the 80% of things that don't matter, or the 90% of things that don't actually matter or make you feel better in your day-to-day. So I love the art of noticing that and noticing why and what is the addiction there and what's the intention there as to why you're on it.
I think, what if we all asked ourselves, like, why am I posting this? And then really digging underneath. If it's like, well, I want to capture a memory, well, we can do that on our phone. We don't have to post. Well, using it as a scrapbook.
Yeah.
Or, well, there's other ways. Like, or what is it really? What is it really about?
Yeah, what would happen if we didn't get the likes or we didn't get the views? Then would we be as inclined to want to post? Because I'm pretty sure that a lot of the behaviors have to do with that instant validation of, I posted this, someone's making me feel good about my life, so I'm going to post. And immediately it's like, oh, wow, your vacation looks great, or what you're up to in your business looks so good. And it's just that quick hit of validation that we'll seek it, right? We want to feel validated and seen and heard. But the thing is, it is a false sense of validation, because until we actually feel that from within, it doesn't matter how many people like your post. You're going to have 1,000 people like it, and then one day you're going to want that number to change to 100,000, and then it would be 1,000,000, and it will never be enough. So we don't ever get that full satisfaction from it. And the scary part is sometimes it feels really good because so many people might have liked something, and then the next day you post something and it's like crickets. And then you're on that roller coaster of, well, why don't people like this? And did I not share it in the way that I wish I did? And why aren't people relating to this anymore? And I see that happen all the time. And that's the emotional roller coaster behind it that causes us to like question ourselves and bring up that fear and have all those feelings, and as to why social media is such a complicated relationship.
It is, because there can be some positive. So I don't want to like feel like let's say someone died and you need to post an obituary, or you have something, you're doing an event and you want people to come. I mean, there can be positives, but the biggest piece is, how is it affecting you emotionally and psychologically? How is it affecting your connection with other people? And I feel like this is what I'm seeing. Even in families, we'll go. Sometimes my husband will be on his iPad. We're like, oh, you're being an iPad. My kids will say to him, you're being an iPad kid. That's the new thing, the millennial or whatever they're saying, the iPad kid. And it's kind of like a way to say, hey, put it down. Absolutely. And I think we need to evaluate, how is it affecting your relationships?
Oh, yes. And within your four walls of your home.
Exactly.
Like if everyone's on their device at the dinner table or right after dinner, and you all just plop on different sections of the couch, and you think that you're sort of connecting and hanging out and spending time together. There's been studies about this in terms of even couples in bed. Like once you go to bed and you sort of just pick up your phones and then you're both scrolling in bed beside each other. So there's this false sense of, well, we're together, but are you together? Is it intentional time that you're spending like chatting about your day or reflecting on maybe something that happened with your kids or something that happened at work? Or are you looking externally for those feelings to be validated and to have people outside of your own home sort of validating that? So yeah, I absolutely think it's so interesting how it's changed family dynamics, and that it is a problem that a lot of people are facing, whether it's with your kids and their screen time, whether it's with your partner wanting more deep conversations to be had, but people's attention is being pulled in a million directions. It becomes this challenge that we're all faced with in different parts of our day-to-day, when teachers are faced with students who are on their phones all the time and trying to get them to put them down. So we are in this sort of epidemic around it, especially when it comes to loneliness and things like that. We are feeling like we're connected, but we're not inherently like very deeply connected right now. So it is really interesting. I love that you said it can be used for good. There are things that you can use it for. I love it for the messaging. So when someone can access me directly on Instagram because of an opportunity that's come up, or I get to know someone that way, I think that's really cool that someone across the world can discover something that I'm up to and resonate with it, and then easily reach out and connect with me. So I love it for the messaging. I think that if it weren't for the messaging, I truthfully don't know that I would want to be on it. I don't even know if my business would be on it. So I think you have to find what are those things that light you up within the apps, and then try to just use it for those purposes rather than thinking you need to do all of it.
Yes. And I think what the key to your book about living in the now, right? Mm-hmm. We look at what takes us away from being in the now, because that's what we're kind of really here to do, is like live in the now, see the person who's in front of you. See them, attune to them, notice them. We all want to be noticed, but we're so distracted that we're not noticing not only what we feel, but we're like not really noticing who's in front of us.
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like that's the call. Like, what is taking you away from the present moment? And the phone is a huge one.
Yeah, the phone's a huge one. And the book is essentially all about creating experiences in your everyday life in simple ways, doing simple things that will bring you back to the present moment. So it's divided into 4 sections. There's nest, nature, nurture, and nourish. So there's some food related stuff. There's stuff that you can do within your home, stuff you can do outside within nature in terms of going for walks, but they're creative ways. I kind of call it like a cookbook, but for everyday experiences. So it has photography. It has a how-to guide for each activity. There's different ways and different suggestions that you can make the activity your own. But it is about finding those simple moments that drop you back into present. So an example would be cafe at home. It sounds so simple, but it's how do you create a moment or an experience for yourself or your loved ones where you can turn your like living room or a little kitchen nook into a cafe and play some music and light some candles and make it feel like you're having an experience, but it's just a regular Saturday morning that you've suddenly elevated to feel more connected to yourself, to the experiences in your life, and to enjoy them with the company that surrounds you. So it's full of activities like that just allow you to remember that it is those simple moments in your day-to-day that make up a fulfilling life. It's not about just chasing the bigger things. We all look forward to the vacation. We all look forward to the promotion at work or the bigger house or whatever. There's lots of different things. But this is about realizing that it is those small and simple moments that you can turn into memories that you will actually have for a lifetime to hold on to.
I love that so, so much. What's been your favorite activity out of the book that has been the most transformational in your own life? Like you really feel has made the biggest difference in your own life. What would that be?
That's a beautiful question. It's funny, I brought up the cafe at home, and I think, to be honest, that is one of them, because during the pandemic in Toronto, we had really crazy closures where for a long time we weren't able to go to a coffee shop or go to a restaurant. So we weren't seeing anybody or having an experience outside of our home. So during the pandemic, that became a saving grace for my husband and I. We would explore different parts of our home, and all the activities actually in the book, I've done them all. And I did a lot of them over the pandemic. And that's why it was so meaningful. And I thought, well, why can't people do this all the time? We don't need to be in a pandemic to enjoy moments within our lives and our homes. And so I would turn the entire living room. We would grab a tablecloth, put it on a side table, play some Parisian music in the background, go and get a really good coffee and do a little French press situation. And then we would put books on the table, and I'd put flowers on the table, and I would just convert the living room into this area that would transport us into a different feeling. But it was part of our everydays. It wasn't a thing that we needed to escape to. It was a matter of bringing that beauty and joy into our day to day. So that's an example. Another one that's really fun is it's called Just Because Cake. And it's about the fact that as adults, we don't celebrate things enough. When you're a kid, you have a birthday every year. You usually get a cake on your birthday. You're going to lots of birthday parties, and it's so fun. And it's when you're an adult, there's so many things to celebrate for yourself, not even for other people, but for yourself, the achievements that you have, even if you just had a day that was really tough, but you got through it. So Just Because Cake is about the fact that you as an adult can make that decision to celebrate yourself and get a cake, whether it's a slab cake from a grocery store. It doesn't really matter, but it's take the moments to celebrate yourself and have that sense of play and childlike adventure within yourself to enjoy life's little moments that should be celebrated.
I love that. As we wrap up, what's been your most transformational book, or the one that's helped you throughout your, I know this is a big question. If you had to pick just your top book, what would it be?
Can I say two? There's two.
Sure. Oh yeah, you can do two.
The first one is The Untethered Soul.
I love that. Yes.
Such a good book. And it just is such basic principles about life. But once you read it, and if you really understand it, then I think it's completely transformational. And then the second one would be A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Also very it's these simple reminders, but they just put it in a way that when you read the book, you think, oh, of course this makes sense. All these things, it's not about everyone else. And it's not about, I don't need to get involved in what other people think or how I have to show up. It's tuning into yourself. And it's that reminder of living life on your terms and showing up for yourself. And I think rereading those books is such a beautiful thing, because you can never have too many reminders of that. So I love those.
Those are great books. Those are great books to keep, because people reread those two books. Those are reread them. You're oh, wait, I didn't get this the first time around.
You learn something each time.
Yeah, exactly. Where can people find you if they're I love Palak? Where can I find her, learn more about her?
Yes, you can definitely send me a message on social media, since I love getting all these messages, and that's what I love it for. But you can find me on Instagram at Palak Dave. You can also find me at embiria.ca. That's embiria.ca. All of my offers and things are on there. Our Embiria Social Club, which is a women's community, is on there. So both of those places. And then the book is available on Amazon.
And we'll link it in the show notes. So go grab it. Thank you so much, Palak, for your heart, your wisdom, and your energy. I'm so grateful for you and spending time with us today.
This has been such a great conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps, along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week, and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, KristenD voice.com. Thanks and have a great day.